Yeah, different time.
Okay.
This is East Coast time.
The City of Riverbank Regular City Council and Local Redevelopment Authority Board meeting is now in session. Today is February 11th, 2020. The time is 6 p.m. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful day. We come to you with praise and thanksgiving. We ask you, Heavenly Father Jesus, to give this elected council and staff the ability to make the decisions that best serves this community. We ask you, Heavenly Father Jesus, to be with each leader that you've placed in high office. Today we come to you and we ask you, Heavenly Father Jesus, to be with the two service families that was lost in Afghanistan over the weekend. We ask that you be with them. Bless those families. Let them know that you're beside them. We ask you, Heavenly Father Jesus, to be with the first responders. Be with our local police department. Heavenly Father, be with our firefighters as they go and serve this community. We ask you, Heavenly Father Jesus, to be with each one here in this council chamber tonight. Bless them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. Roll call.
Council Authority Member District 2, Cindy Foster. Here. Council Authority Member District 3, Cal Campbell.
Here.
Council Authority Member District 4, Darlene Barbara Martinez.
Here.
Vice Mayor Chair Luis Uribe.
Here.
Mayor Chair Richard D. O'Brien.
Here. There's no changes to the agenda. Any council authority member or staff who has a direct conflict of interest on any scheduled item, please identify now. Seeing none, we'll go on to public comments, which at this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council LRA Board. Individual comments will be limited to a maximum of 5 minutes per person, and each person may speak once. Time cannot be yielded. Under state law, matters presented during the public comment period cannot be discussed or acted upon. Are there any public comments?
Evening, Mayor, council members. Michael Riddell, the Public Works Director for the City of Riverbank. I would like to give you some information and give the public some information on the chlorination of our potable water system that occurred last week. As you're all aware, there was a lot of information going around that was pretty erroneous and really causing some major issues for some people. So to give you a little background, we do not chlorinate all the time. We do it for specific reasons, usually 2, sometimes 3 times a year, depending on what type of maintenance or work that we need to do on the system. We recently did some major work on 2 of our wells. When you get into the wells themselves, it's prudent and very precautionary to chlorinate because obviously you don't want bacteria in the system. Okay, so because of that reason and because we had done those 2 wells, we deemed it necessary to go ahead and chlorinate just to be on the safe side. Let me give you some numbers, right? So 4 parts per million, right? That is the maximum level of chlorine we're allowed to have in our system. That's the maximum level the state says we can put in our system, right? 2 parts per million is typical for a city that chlorinates all the time, which there are several cities around us that do that. We are not one of them. It is not necessary for us to do that. Somewhere between 3 and 6 parts per million of free chlorine is your typical swimming pool, sometimes even hotter, depending on time of year, how many people's in the pool, this kind of thing, right? When we chlorinated our system, our average throughout the whole system was 0.8 parts per million, right? So what you're going to do when you're chlorinating something is you use chlorine to kill bacteria. So typically what you do is put enough chlorine to get to what's called a break point, meaning that if there's any bacteria, it takes up all the chlorine. And then once you get to the break point, you start having a residual. And you run that residual knowing that you've now taken care of any bacteria that could be in the system. And you run, like I said, we could run all the way up to 4 parts per million. We don't. There was really no reason to go that hot type thing. And I can guarantee you that it would have been much more noticeable had we run that much higher. And knowing that typically in cities, for instance, Ceres where I live, they chlorinate all the time. And they keep a 2-part residual. So that's 2 parts per million, right? We use sodium hyperchlorite, which is 12.5% by volume, which means we typically use liquid form because we have liquid chlorinators. We typically buy it in what's called a 5-gallon carboy, or a jug, a 5-gallon jug. That is put into a tank at the well site, then ran through a metering system that is monitored, both physically and also through our SCADA system for the amount of chlorine that we're putting in. We can set up our chlorinators to chlorinate where we want. So in other words, you could set it up to have 1 part, 2 part, part and a half, whatever you want type thing. Typically, we will go in until we get that residual. When we start seeing the residual, we know we now have free chlorine within the system, which means there's no bacteria, and then we just kind of hold it there for a period of time. In this case, 5 days, right? And it becomes more noticeable as it stays in the system longer. Not because the residual gets higher or the residual gets stronger or anything that. Typically, we get it up to what we want, hold it there, and then just let it slowly start to dissipate because chlorine will eventually go out of the system on its own. Right? So once we get to that residual and we know we've done what we needed to do to protect public health, which is the reason why we do it, then we're good to go and we can, at that point, stop. Now, last week, I know there was a lot of information that was being put out on Facebook about what we're doing and how we're doing it by the general public, and these kind of things were coming along with a lot of misinformation about what we were doing and how we were going about it, the residual amounts and these kind of things. So the issue typically when you go into this point, and we can play the customer service role, as Sean and I spoke about, where yes, we could notify before we chlorinate. We're not required to. Cities typically don't, right? We do this to protect public health. Even to the point where Friday, we had one of our local citizens call the state. And the state, our engineer for our water system, in turn contacted us and requested all of our information on our chlorination, which we supplied to him. And at the end of the day, his answer to us was, you're doing what you're supposed to do. Actually, you're pretty low. So with that being said, I just wanted to make sure everybody understands. And certainly, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to contact us so we can give you the information that you're looking for and the correct information. Any questions?
I have a
We're
question.
not allowed to
Oh.
ask questions.
Oh, that's right.
This is public comment.
I'm sorry.
Don't trap us like that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jose Dominguez, and I work with El Concilio. And El Concilio is the lead agency for the census for 2020 for Stanislaus County. And I'm just here tonight just to share information about the census. It is coming about a month. March 12th, everyone will be getting an invitation from the U.S. Census to complete it. And we'll have until April 27th to complete the census. Each household that does not complete the census by then, beginning in May, that's when the U.S. Census will be coming to your household to complete the census. We will have until July 31st, which is the last day to complete the census. for 2020. For those individuals that don't complete the census, we'll have to wait until 2030. For those individuals that are not counted, it's going to be $2,000 per person per year that the community is going to get lost in federal funding. That equates to about $200,000 for the next 10 years per person. So it's very important that we get the word out and make sure that we complete the census. The sooner the better, because as we put things aside and put it for later, sometimes we don't complete it or we forget about it. So I have some flyers with me that I'll leave with you guys. If you guys do want to contact, you guys can contact Damian Martinez. I am working with him. He works for Stanislaus County Chief Executive Office. I'm working closely with him on the census efforts for Stanislaus County. Also, you can contact him also if you guys are requesting a training. U.S. Census will do trainings to provide more detailed information about the census and the impacts that it has to the communities. Basically is federal funding for nutrition, hospitals, schools, all the federal funding programs that are available for the communities. And then also political, that I won't get into, but it also impacts political seats. Thank you for your time. Who do I leave the flyers with?
City Clerk, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and city staff. Leanne Jones Cruz. I live here in Riverbank. I have 2 items on my list tonight. One is just an update for the Downtown Business Coalition. We're going to be having a meeting this Thursday at 6 o'clock, Pizza Plus. 2 items that are on the agenda that I just kind of want to share with you is the group will be discussing their collective marketing, advertising plan that they're putting together. They're going to be doing something at Galaxy, and you're probably going, why is she sharing that? Because they're going to be showcasing downtown. Their plans are to have like drones coming through, and so not just advertising the downtown businesses. It's going to be a really awesome opportunity to kind of showcase Riverbank. It'll be cool. So the marketing director from the Galaxy is going to be coming there. It's kind of the main item on the agenda for Thursday night. So I'll bring you an update after that also. The second agenda item on there is the Sip and Stroll. Not too much information yet, other than it'll be the second weekend in September is what we're planning. So again, I'll have more details later for those. So that's the one item. Second item, of course, dog park lady right here. I didn't bring Chloe with me tonight, but she's at home crying because I left her. I just wanted to, especially after the report from the gentleman who did, by the way, a fabulous job at presenting. I've heard many of those, you should know, and he was really good. Two things that were highlighted. Apparently, we need to do a little focus on that dog park, whether the mayor likes it or not. And I'm thinking this is a perfect opportunity to, one, talk about expanding it, since twofold. It was up there on some things that he recommended us spending and considering using some of our funds on the dog park. It is fabulous, love it, but it tends to be a little small. And we knew that. There's still room, and I think we should think about expanding it at least out to where we had originally talked about it. So that's one thing I'd like to throw out there. 2, I think we need to be really, really careful about maintaining it. I used to go to the dog park that was in Modesto. They didn't put any water on it. It ended up turning into a complete dust bowl. And I've been out of commission for about 2 weeks, taking my dogs down there. When I went back today, it's pretty dusty and rough, and the grass is looking really, really dry. One thing that tells you is that it gets a lot of use. That's a good thing, but we also need to prepare. And if we're going to continue, we just need to focus a little bit on maintaining it. So that's the other thing, and we probably need to get some water on it. And with that cushy reserve that you guys have done so great at getting in there, this might be something that you consider spending some funds on, and either expanding it or even talk about getting another one in town. Thank you.
No further public comment. We'll move on to the consent item, consisting of item 3A, waive readings, item 3B, approval of the January 28th, 2020 City Council and Local Redevelopment Authority Board minutes. Item 3B1, approval of the January 30th, 2020 Special City Council minutes. Item 3C, a resolution authorizing the execution of a performance agreement between the City of Riverbank and SS Consulting for the coordination of the 2020 Cheese and Wine Festival. Item 3D, a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a lease agreement with SS Consulting for the area in the City of Riverbank associated with the Riverbank Cheese and Wine Festival. Is there anyone wishing to pull any items? Is there anyone from the public wishing to discuss any of these items? Seeing none, I bring it back to the council for consideration.
I'll make a motion, we approve
Excuse me.
Go for it.
It's an amendment to,
Yes, I do have an amendment to the minutes of item 3.B. I will be amending the 3.B minutes to correct a sentence that was in part of the action of item 5.1 to state, motion failed by city council by roll call vote. So that,
by roll call, okay.
yes. So it's a correction to the minutes.
Well then, if you're correcting Cruz, it's spelled C-R-U-Z.
Thank you.
Okay, with that correction, are there any,
Yep. I'll make a motion, we approve the consent calendar with the amendment.
I second.
we have a motion to approve the city council consent calendar and amend item 3B as stated.
Council Authority members Barbara Martinez,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Fossey,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Chair Uribe,
Yes.
Mayor Chair O'Brien.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item 4.1, second reading by title only and adoption of proposed ordinance number 2020-002, amending Title 11, Business Regulation by adding a Chapter 126, Hemp Cultivation to the Riverbank Municipal Code to prohibit the outdoor cultivation of hemp.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a second reading. Again, the ordinance is to prohibit the outdoor cultivation of hemp. We sort of talked about it at great length last meeting. I'm happy to go through any detail of the ordinance, but it remains unchanged as of the first reading.
Are there any questions or comments? Are there any questions or comments on item 4.1 from the public? Seeing none, I bring it back for consideration.
I make a motion, we approve item 4.1.
I second it.
We have a motion to approve item 4.1 and a second.
Council members Barbara Martinez,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Fossey,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Uribe,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item 4.2, second reading by title only and adoption of proposed ordinance number 2020-03, amending Title 15, Land Usage, Chapter 150, Building Regulations, Section 150.01 through 150.16, adoption of standard codes and adoption by reference to the 2019 California Administrative, Building, Residential, Electrical, Mechanical, Plumbing, Energy, Existing Buildings, Historical Buildings, Fire, and Green Buildings to the City of Riverbank Code of Ordinances.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, discussed this at the last meeting. This is a number of sort of routine updates that the state does that primarily relate to mostly on the residential side, and those were detailed in the staff report, and be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, I bring it back for council's consideration.
I make a motion, we approve item 4.2.
I'll second it.
We have a motion to approve item 4.2 and a second.
Council members Barbara Martinez,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Fossey,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Uribe,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item 6.1, Local Redevelopment Authority LRA Budget Report Fiscal Year and 2018-2019.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Our Assistant City Manager, Maricela Garcia, is going to stand in for Melissa Holdaway, who's out sick this evening. But Maricela helps her with budget stuff all year long, and so she's qualified to speak on this. And I'll bring in.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Since I wasn't here to present my fabulous 5-year financial forecast for you, I thought I'd present this LRA budget, which I've never presented to you before. So good luck to me today. As required through resolution when the LRA was implemented in the city of Riverbank, we are presenting to you the fiscal year end 2018-19 report. The LRA is required to provide quarterly reports to you, so we wanted to make sure that although we've already passed the 6-month mark since the end of the fiscal year, that we presented this report to you so that you were aware of the status of the LRA's budget. So just a reminder, the LRA is comprised of 3 different funds. Fund 197 is its operating fund. This is where all of the caretaker revenue that comes in from the Army goes. This is where all of our tenant lease amounts go, as well as any amounts that they pay towards utilities. And it pays for operations and maintenance of the site itself. Fund 198 is a grant we received from the Office of Economic Adjustment that goes towards paying 100% of the salary for Melissa, and then also a portion of the city manager's salary and now the Public Works Director's salary. And then Fund 199 is the ESCA, so that's the Environmental Services Cooperative Agreement, which is doing the remediation out at the site, 100% funded by the Army, so no city funds are going towards this project. Just a couple of notes. Caretaker revenue payments were delayed before the end of the fiscal year. What does that mean? That means that the Army has failed to remit to us the required amount as per our agreement with them. There are some discrepancies with the way that they interpret the language and the way that that we and our attorneys interpret the language. So as we work through that, we are accruing the revenues, meaning that we are reporting them as revenue that we will be receiving, but the actual funds are not in our hands. And then second, the roof and siding project was completed this fiscal year. So the last of the roof and siding that the LRA was responsible for replacing has been completed. In Fund 198, which is the grant funds, the grant has moved from a federal fiscal year calendar to now a calendar year basis. And so we see a bit of a shift in the ways that the revenues are reported. And for the ESCA, which is Fund 199, we continue to receive revenues from the Army as they're being dispersed out to the contractor for payment on the work that's completed. And so overall, here's what the budget versus actual revenues look like. So we were at 75% of the budgeted revenues. As we mentioned, the caretaker revenue is one where we only received about half of the budgeted amount. That doesn't mean that we won't receive it in the future, as it is a payable that's due by the Army to the LRA. Budget versus actual expenses, we were at 56% of expenses, knowing that we were going to have some shortfalls in revenue, not only because of the lack of the caretaker revenue that came from the Army, but also because of the loss of several large tenants. We decided that we were going to delay some of the expenses that we had projected for. Unfortunately, that means that some of the preventative maintenance that was to be performed, we decided to delay until this fiscal year in order to ensure that we would have available revenues. And so overall, this is where our 3 different funds lie. You'll notice that there's a negative almost $300,000 in the leasehold account. That was due to the roof and siding project. But as we mentioned before, there are revenues that are still due to the LRA that will offset some of that coming from the Army, as well as some anticipated revenues that will be coming in this fiscal year that will help offset, particularly with new tenants who will be paying an increased amount of lease amounts, and then hopefully the potential of a master developer coming in to take over that. And so that is the LRA budget for the fiscal year 2018-19. Not a figure we want to show you when it comes to a negative amount, but there will be revenues that will be coming in to offset that. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
Only question I have, the caretaker revenue payments, they've been dropping year after year. Has the Army explained why that is?
Typically, the process that you will go through is that the LRA and the Army will discuss what costs they will cover. As we start to get closer to transitioning the property over to the city, they will start to ramp down the amounts. The same happens with the grant that we received from the Office of Economic Adjustment. As we get closer, ultimately what needs to happen is that your lease revenue should cover 100% of the cost. And so that's why they start to sort of ramp that down.
And it's we've actually sort of argued with them over this matter because it's not like the costs for running the facility ramp down as you come closer to transfer. So the philosophy doesn't really make sense. Their concept is that they're sort of trying to push you out of the nest, essentially. But it's different for the city of Riverbank because, as council knows, we're trying to transfer this on to someone else anyway when we get into our ownership. So.
I'll be back in D.C. with Stancock. I would like to visit Deputy Secretary Kramer again, please, if you can arrange that. And that's going to be a topic. By that time, we should have comments made on the faucet. That should be done by the 5th of March at the latest. And the governor's office has promised to push it along in his area, the DTSC and the Cal EPA. Those are the two big ones that we have to. Do we have to worry about US EPA? They've been involved in the process since.
My understanding is that in terms of the transfer component of the project, what we're really concerned about is getting California's approvals. The Army has shared, frankly, that the holdup always seems to be the states at the end of the process.
Well, they're more concerned with Governor Newsom's political advances in the year 2020, but they don't understand he's not running for governor. Okay. I do have a question on the OEA grant. How much does that actually cover?
That covers 100% of Melissa Holdaway's salary, so salary and benefits, so probably about 160. And then I think they cover another 10% of the city manager's costs.
Okay. And then the last one, with the caretaker, how much of that does it cover for security?
A small portion of it.
So if I can have that broken out too, and I can give that to him as an advance read. Okay, thank you.
It's probably not more than a quarter, right?
No.
Are we still required to maintain it?
Yes, and have it 24-hour security. There's
Yes.
Right, and so they're paying for 25%? Why don't we just have it for 25% of the day? I'm not bashful.
Yeah, our security costs are $164,000.
Okay. So it would be in their best. Any more questions from the public? Then the best thing for them to do is transfer it so they don't have to pay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Bring it back to the council for consideration.
I make a motion we approve item 6.1.
I'll second it.
We have a motion to approve in a second on item 6.1.
Authority members Barbara Martinez,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Bossy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Uribe,
Yes.
Chair O'Brien.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item 6.2, Development Agreement 01-2017, Annual Review Flavors, to consider a city manager's report on the annual review of the development agreement for Flavors for the time period of January 1, 2019 to December 31st, 2019.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So this, I'm going to say a lot of the same things for both items 6.2 and 6.3, but essentially the development agreement for Flavors, this will be their second annual review. we know where the project is. It's on Patterson and Oakdale in the old lube shop there. This is their public benefit arrangement, in case you had forgotten. They are obviously now in the third tier. And people ask this a lot. To give everybody a perspective of how much business they do, they paid the minimum, the floor price of $10,000, I think the first month that they opened, which was somewhere in the mid part of the month, so they didn't have a full month. Since that time, they've always been paying a percentage. So they've always been above the floor, because it's whichever is greater. And as of January 7th of 2020, you see the number there at the bottom. So we have received a number of public concerns through the public hearing process, as most everybody here on the council probably remembers: traffic, exposure to cannabis, crime, property values. None of those have proven to be the reality. In fact, Donna Kenny was telling me that when she contacted our chief to ask if there was any kind of update, he said he didn't even need to run reports to the system because he was aware that there wasn't any problems at really either of our facilities. So, been run very well. And I would just say, from my perspective, Flavors has been a really good partner with the city, and have consistently responded to any even minor complaints we've received right away. So our recommendation for item 6.2 is that council find the applicant in compliance with development agreement for this calendar year, or for last calendar year of 2019.
Questions from the council? Comments? Any comments or from the public?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Just one question: that Sean, that figure that you showed that we've received, was it 585,000? Was that just for the past calendar year, or just the beginning?
Correct.
Past calendar year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I bring it back to the council.
I'll make a motion we approve item 6.2.
I'll second it.
We have a motion to approve and a second on item 6.2.
Council members Barbara Martinez,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Fosse,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Uribe,
Yes.
Mayor Ryan.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item 6.3, Development Agreement 02-2017 Annual Review, Riverbank Cannabis Collective, to consider a city manager's report on the annual review of development agreement for the Riverbank Cannabis Collective for the time period of January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019.
Thank you, Mayor. So similarly, we have had a very good overall relationship with Riverbank Cannabis Collective. A little different relationship with them because they're sort of our neighbors here downtown, and I personally and everybody else sort of runs into the folks in the back there. So we'll go through that, and then I'll give a couple other thoughts. But this is their first annual review. We know where they're located at the old Riverbank Hotel. It's been very nicely remodeled down there. Here is their public benefit arrangement, which is slightly different than Flavors, and that was a conscious decision on behalf of council. We did a slight amendment during the first year of this term to their payment at their request, and also another change was made with regard to wine and cheese, I believe, this year as well. But in general, our experience with them has been very good. No issues to speak of, and really the number one thing that was brought up, I think, at Planning Commission was traffic and parking was a big one. I remember people were very concerned about the lack of parking. I can just tell you that I walk to City Hall South every day, a couple times a day probably, and I never have noticed any major issues, at least during the daytime. And obviously none of the other concerns that were mentioned here. I will also say that from a partnership / volunteer perspective, Deanna and all of the folks over there are always willing to help out with things. In fact, Deanna was out at 6 a.m. with us doing the pit count here in Riverbank. So we've just appreciated our relationship with them as well, and hope them continued good work in the future. And that's we also recommend that they're in compliance with their DA.
Could you go back to the payment over the last year?
Yep.
It was $62,500.
Correct.
That's $5,300 a month?
Yeah, they've remained more at the floor for most of the beginning of the year, and then also there was, remember, the council made a modification to allow them a little extra time at pay step A as a request, I
But
think.
we removed it when we gave them other concessions.
It came off at the end, the language is structured so that it came off at the end of this I think it was a 3-month term, and then it popped into the remainder. So now they're paying at where they're supposed to be.
At $9,000 a month?
I think the most recent payment, Marisol, did you get that receivable?
Oh, they've been there over a year.
Yeah, but so I'd have to go back to the very specific language they have, but our analysis is they're in compliance with the way it was written for them to
Okay.
work.
I see months. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Question, how is the gross receipts determined? I believe Flavors was paying the 5%, and they're paying 6%. What's?
When council considered this one, DA, there was an argument that Flavors, first of all, was a larger store. It had a presence immediately on the thoroughfare, so better representation. And I believe council felt at the time that this property required a lot more work to get going. It was a smaller facility, and the focus was less sort of general retail, recreational, and more medical. And so, to my knowledge, that was the understanding of why there was a difference in floor payments, but they are paying a larger amount in top-level gross receipts.
If they get there.
If they get there, yes.
Okay, any other comments? I open it up to the public for comment. Seeing none, I bring it back to the council for consideration.
I'll make a motion, we approve item 6.3.
I second.
We have a motion to approve and a second on item 6.3.
Council members Barbara Martinez,
Yes.
Yes.
C.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Uribe,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item 6.4, space use and needs assessment project update.
Okay, so, we really this is gonna take some thinking and discussing, and, there's a lot to this item. So Maricela, our Assistant City Manager, Maricela Garcia, has been sort of the project lead on this from the very beginning. I don't think that either she nor I realized how expansive of a project it was going to end up being, and what we come to you tonight was with an interim report that our consultant Indigo has put together that's going to sort of lay out for you. Essentially what he'll tell you here in a moment is we've reached a fork in the roads with regard to the report. There is a short-term and a medium-term and a long-term concept, and in order for us to finalize the report and set the city on a path to hopefully having a better facility in the future, we need a little direction. And so that's it in a nutshell, but Maricela has been with this every day, and so I thought maybe you could expand a little on that.
Sure. So the reason why we're coming to you is because in reality, currently we're out of space. All of the departments are going to have difficulty adding the staff that they need in order to be able to properly serve the city. State mandates that we need to make sure that we're complying with, utility billing, ramping up with consumption. There's a need for staff, and unfortunately there is no space to place them at. And so when we're looking at short term, it's not just the immediate needs, but just within the next 5 years, we're projecting almost a 50% increase in the staff that's needed. So what we're hoping to be able to achieve today is to give you an idea of some of the modifications we could make should council decide that that's the path path we want to move down in order to be able to address these short-term needs, or whether it's simply looking long-term at a unified city hall somewhere in the future and evaluating some options on how to be able to finance that. And so with that, I present to you John Hammond. He is with the firm of Indigo, Hammond and Plale, and he'll be able to go through the variety of options with you.
Thank you, Maricela and Sean. So we are very pleased, of course, to be working with Riverbank. You're a growing city, and you're facing problems that a lot of cities in California are facing. That is, you're growing, and so you need more people to work for you to take care of your various civic needs. We started out, as Maricela said, looking basically at your near-term needs, your mid-term needs, and your more distant future needs, what we're calling 2040 needs, and looking at all those things and seeing how to get from here, where you're severely overcrowded in certain of your facilities, and into the future. We started out by polling all your staff and just sent around a polling document, and people responded to it, just responding to their current needs and their current situation, which I'll describe in a little more detail when we look at some of the plans of some of the facilities. We came down here and met with the department heads, spent the whole morning with them, discussing the issues, their staffing needs, and their perceptions of what was going on, what their problems were with space and finding spaces for their staff. Then after that, we spent the entire afternoon touring all of your existing facilities, the police station up the street, City Hall North, City Hall South, and the Corporation Yard. Then we worked with Sean and Maricela, gathering up information on what your immediate staffing needs are, and then moving out into the future towards 2040, what they ultimately believed your staffing needs would be. And then we took all that information and working with them, created organizational charts which basically classify the various staff in each department with the kind of spatial needs that each particular staff person has in terms of size of workstation, size of office, and other, facility needs that they have. And that got us to, let me see if I can do this properly. Yes, well, here we are. Just those are the facilities we looked at, the Courtyard, Sheriff's Building, City Hall North, and City Hall South. But what we got to, based on all of this work we did, which we're not showing you, will be in our final report, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how we got to this particular chart. And we broke your departments down into where we thought people would go. You've got a council chambers, you've got an administration department, and you've got your redevelopment agency. And all of those, if you add everything up that they need about 5,900 square feet, basically 6,000 square feet. And you currently have in this facility, if we put those departments in there, you have approximately 5,300 square feet in City Hall North. So actually, there's a good potential to rearrange this building and fit everybody in. Then the next column, the yellow column, we looked at the finance department, and their current need is for approximately 2,700 square feet. So they have almost 2,800 square feet. They have a large need, and right now they're crammed in with 2 or 3 other departments in City Hall South in a bad situation, which I'll describe a little better moving forward. You also have the Parks and Recreation Department, which in order to create a facility for administration and everything that needs to go on in this building, would have to move out of this building and presumably move into some kind of rental space that would probably need to be remodeled to make room for them. Same thing actually for the finance department. And then we have City Hall South, which is where you have existing 3,770 square feet, and we calculated the need at 3,759 square feet, so it's kind of a nice match. So this is your current and near future needs, or what is on here, and then we have the Public Works Department, which I'll get to a little later. So basically, your total need for space in the near future is 15,269 square feet. And right now, you have in these existing buildings about 9,000 square feet. So you're short approximately 6,000 square feet to fit your current needs. So then first looking at the police station, which actually weren't on those charts because the current sheriff's building appears to be adequate for current and near future needs. And so we didn't actually go any further with them. They do have, their biggest issue actually is their parking lot, which is not a secure facility, and it's dangerous for them to leave the parking lot rapidly, which they sometimes need to do. However, pending a more in-depth study of what you're going to do going forward, are you going to stick with the sheriff's department? Are you going to create your own independent police department? And then a study of where these folks might end up. We are basically leaving them alone because they don't need things immediately. And currently, some of their needs can be, since they are affiliated with the sheriff's department, can be handled there. So they're in pretty relatively good shape. There are 2 potential sites here that we looked at as potential for ultimately the need for an expanded facility with a secure parking lot, but that would be sometime in the future. So moving along to your City Hall North facility, where we are, of course. We're in this existing room. This building has a number of problems as it is. I'm sure you're aware. You don't have accessible restrooms. You're in a relatively small room here. You have no lobby space. It's generally, I would say, considered by modern standards, an insecure facility for this kind of public meeting. And we do have Parks and Rec next door, and they actually have enough space there as things stand now, but administration doesn't have enough space. You don't have enough space for restroom facilities. So we looked at a number of different options, assuming that Parks and Rec would move to another facility, of how we might rearrange this building in kind of progressively more complex ways that get the facility better and better, but of course each iteration cost more. So the first thing that we're recommending is that you create accessible restrooms with basically better toilet facilities. There is a big problem in your facility now in that the staff in that part of the building to the south have to walk outside in order to get to a restroom facility. So that's definitely a problem. You have, break room is too small. You lack a good conference room. People have to go to City Hall South to get to a conference room. And, like I said before, your council chamber lacks capacity and security. So some of those problems are solved in this iteration. We have an exit door for the council chambers, which makes it better. We have a conference room, and we have room for your administration department to expand. And so that works pretty well in this facility. Then here's a better facility yet. The red lines indicate the walls that are changed. And again, we've created at least a larger room by getting rid of these restrooms here and moving them elsewhere and creating a conference room. So this is a more expensive facility. And then if we were really going to rearrange this facility to just kind of really optimize it, we would suggest moving the city hall to the south into what is currently the city manager's space, and then creating a reasonable space for everyone up in this area here. And pointer for me, excellent. Thank you. A mouse. Yes. Okay. All right. Oops, there we are, yes. Creating a nice lobby space and a separate reasonable admin space, restrooms, actually a staff restroom, and a nice conference room. When the city council goes into executive session, you'd have a place to go, and better security. So this is pretty much a completely gutting this city hall, or this building, and completely rebuilding it, and it would last you for a while. So anyway, that's the City Hall North. Any questions about that? Okay, moving on to City Hall South. Here we do have a very noticeable problem with space. There's too many people in that building, and it lacks public restrooms. Finance department in particular has problems with security. They're handling money, and they have security issues with that. And the staff is all kind of in very, very tight quarters, and staff is working with sensitive information about finances, sensitive information about the staff, payroll, etc. And there really isn't privacy for that to be done properly in that facility. And then the departments are fractured between the administration department and your building and planning departments. So it isn't good. So we would suggest that a rental space would be located for the finance department. They need about 2,500 square feet of space, and then that space would be set up for them so that there'd be security for their needs, and then there would be enough room for the building to be reorganized, basically with your development services department and your planning and building departments. And we have two different arrangements for that we've looked at, but there is adequate, or pretty close to adequate space for them if we do that. In fact, you could actually even just without doing any remodel, just leave the building as it is. And at basically almost no cost, you could rearrange that. It would be better to do what we're suggesting here, and we have two different alternatives which require progressively more change.
John, as you go through the slides, do you have any kind of estimated costs for the options yet?
Yeah.
Could you include those as you go through the options?
Pardon me?
Or could you
Sure,
let us
yeah.
know what the costs
Yeah.
are?
So obviously, if the options that we're looking at for this option, let me see which one we've got. Just a second. Yeah, this option would be approximately $400,000 to basically change the finishes in the building, move some walls around, and do some deferred maintenance. The next option, this one is closer to $700,000. So these things are not cheap, obviously. We're assuming prevailing wage and that kind of thing. This would include basically all the costs, all the design and engineering, includes some site costs as well for path of travel and that kind of thing. So it's not just the building itself, it's also includes getting accessibility into the building and that kind of thing, which you would be required by code to do once you start changing things around. So, do you want to go? Yeah, okay. And the next we have, actually we just looked at what, there is a building for rent up the street here, across the street, as I understand, and it's basically a warm shell, so it would need to be completely built out inside. And we looked at it, it's basically about the right size for finance and about the right size for parks and recreation. So it's a nice.
Either or?
Pardon?
Either or?
Either or, not both, yeah. That is assuming, actually, there's a back part of the building, which is, if that could be rented, then you could put both in there. I think the building's now about cut in half. I'm just showing the part on 3rd Street. So anyway, we can set up parks and recreation nicely within that facility, and that's looking at over $1 million to do that, just to do all that remodeling in that space. And I think if you were to engage in that kind of an agreement, you might be able to get the owner to build the suit for you, which there may be ways to do it significantly less expensively. Any questions about that? Then we move on to the corporation yard, and we have a little office building there. It's a little modular temporary building, which is now, I guess it's been there long enough, so you'd call it a permanent building. But it is an inexpensive little building. It has some issues. The restroom is not accessible. The lobby doesn't have proper seating, and there's sort of no way to control. There's not a lobby proper where there's then a gateway that someone can control to get into the rest of the building. And so we suggested a few changes to that, which would be to create a proper lobby space and get an administrative assistant sitting there where they could greet people coming in and control their access to the remainder of the building, and increase the size of the restroom and reorganize the space such that we got another office space worked in, which would, be a big help for your near future needs. In fact, you're within about 200 square feet of what we calculated you would need for this particular building for the near future. Then across the driveway at the Corp Yard is the maintenance building. It's a pre-engineered metal building where you have maintenance over in this area. There's lifts for lifting vehicles to service them, and storage area, and a couple of office spaces. I think at least one of these is used for storage. And then here is a facility that the field staff uses, where they come, they have their lockers, showers, etc., a conference room, break room, and facilities. There's women's restrooms and men's restrooms. There are some issues with this facility in that the restrooms are not entirely accessible, and particularly the women's restroom is cramped. And then you have an upstairs, which is inaccessible. There's no elevator there. So it basically really isn't used except for storage. It's not used very much. It's basically empty and kind of waiting to be developed. So we took a look at how this building could be improved to fit expanded needs for staff, which you have, field staff that is. And one of the things we suggesting is that we put an elevator in for get you to the upstairs, so it would be an accessible building, which you would have to do by code in order to develop the upstairs as office spaces. But we kept this break room and kind of conference area pretty much as it is. We rearranged in the existing space, rearranged the restrooms so that they'd be more accessible, and get a locker room for the women, have an accessible shower. And then have these two rooms as new storage room. And then moving upstairs, we have offices that are necessary for some expanded staff, and of course the elevator. And as you get more people up there, you'd also need a second exit out of that upstairs. Right now, the exit would run down and into the maintenance area, which would not be allowed as egress per code. So we've got that, and that. Let's see, I don't have the figure for that someplace. The cost for that set of improvements. Yeah, we're looking at around $660,000 to make those improvements to that building, which would get you and keep you in good stead for a while. Then moving on, well, just to show you, ultimately, you're going to need an office building for your corporation yard, and you may need, if you need more maintenance facility, you may need to acquire. The corp yard is pretty much tapped out as far as space is concerned for parking and vehicles and storing materials and whatnot, but there is possibility of using some existing park space here for a larger building, or create buy a neighboring property there. So those are some options you have for future development of the corp yard, keeping it where it is unless you just decide to move it somewhere else. So the next we looked at, this is moving out into the 2040 situation. And we project in the future, this is looking at the concept of a unitary city hall, keeping the Public Works Division where it is with that expanded, possibly acquiring some property there so you could take care of their future needs. But just all the other departments, the council chambers, economic development, administration, finance, the development department, parks and recreation, the administration and planning and building divisions, all with all their future needs, in all the needs for staff, conference rooms, restrooms, etc. You come up with a city hall, a unitary city hall that would be good long into the future, would be approximately 24,000 square feet. So that would be a big building, and that would cost you close to $20 million in today's dollars. So that would be a big investment, but it's not cheap, of course, to do the other investments that you would need to make along the way to do the 2040. So it's kind of, it's definitely a bit of a dilemma. We did at least brief, and here is a potential plan for it. Is it possible to move that up a tad on the screen? We're sort of betwixt and between, but maybe.
Just use your scroll. There you go.
There you go. Somebody I didn't do that. Someone that's better than I am did it. Anyway, so what we've done is this is just a diagram. It's definitely not a building, but it begins to show you how we might want to organize a city hall around, possibly as a two-story building. It could also be, this kind of looks like a one-story building here, but around an entry and kind of a circulation gathering courtyard, which would lead into an expanded council chambers, an administration department, a finance department, parks and recreation department, economic development department, and a development services department, all arranged in one city hall. This set of this out here, those are common areas, conference rooms and restrooms and whatnot, which would all be integrated into that. But that's kind of what we're starting to look at. We definitely haven't developed those ideas in any even close to the detail that we spent just looking at kind of your current building stock and what you could do with it to make it work.
John, can you address one thing which has been discussed here at council at least a number of times as we've thought about moving forward with this big project? Is part of the discussion is always where should a unitary building be? Should it be in the downtown? Should it be somewhere else? One of the things that I had a misconception about was that perhaps there was opportunity elsewhere in town on a vacant site to more cheaply build something versus have to demo a bunch of land. And
Right.
you sort of dispelled that rumor a little bit when I asked that question. I was wondering if you could maybe address that a little.
Right, well, we did prepare this map, which shows, this is that building with either Parks and Rec or Finance in it, the potential rental space. There may be there's some other obviously empty buildings downtown which could also be looked at. So this is not the only option for that. And then here's the sheriff's building with their insecure parking lot. There are obviously parcels next door to that could be purchased to expand that facility. So that's a possibility. Although, given the way your town is bifurcated by railroad tracks, it's possible, and there'd be, a lot of discussion about this, you might want a headquarters and a substation, so you have service on both sides of the track. And you have very limited access across the tracks in town. You have your City Hall North with your museum next door, so that kind of presumably forecloses any possibility of expanding there. You do have City Hall South, which is here, and you could purchase properties next door to it. And so that's a definite possibility. If you purchase just the first property next door, that gets you to a 16,000 square foot site. And if you purchase the next set of properties over, you can get to a 22,000 square foot site. So that has some definite possibilities. If you did that, you could probably build on this portion of the site and then leaving everybody in place in City Hall South, and then tear that down and use that as a courtyard space or parking or whatever. But you could do that. Another option is you own this parking lot and you could acquire additional space over here across the street. So, there's definitely some possibilities downtown. They all would presumably require some land acquisition. I suppose you could, we haven't really considered this, but I suppose one could tear down the sheriff's building, move that someplace else, and then build a city hall on this site. That's another option. But anyway, there are options for that.
Questions?
These sites would fit a two-story building, I believe.
I had a question about the 660,000 you said was an estimate for the corporation yard. Did that include the elevator?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I would say, just as a caveat, these are budget level estimates at this point. They need, well, first off, they haven't been really thoroughly vetted with staff, but their ideas, they kind of prove a concept of how the building could be used to accommodate staff. That's what we're doing. Staff is, I'm sure, Sue and other staff members would say, no, we want this here and that there, and things would change as you got into it in depth, but at least it proves the concept of where you could put things.
Do you have any, have you researched any funding for this type of work? Either remodeling or building a new building?
No, that's not part of, coming up with the money isn't part of our scope.
We've had that discussion, so I'll be honest, when Marisol and I, when John presented this, he handed a sealed envelope to Marisol and I that had the budgetary figures in it, one copy of it. And we got back to the office and took a look at it and both sat and sort of stared at each other for a moment. Yeah, so I think that the way, I guess here's what I've said to a couple of council members as we've discussed this week. This is a problem that has been born of 30 years. Many cities that have newer city halls have been saving money in a capital account for that very purpose for decades before they get to the build phase. Small cities under 10,000 can go to the USDA and other granting agencies like that and can get funding for it, which is not, fortunately, our thing. And so it's possible that this is a lot of information you're receiving this evening, and I feel like because this problem has taken decades to sort of come to a head, it's reasonable to take the time that council needs to really think through this to set us on a course, because whatever decision you make will end up having financial ramifications for potentially decades, depending on how you decide to attack the problem, whether it be the short-term solutions that John has mentioned tonight, or whether it be that we limp along with sort of Band-Aids from a space perspective until we can afford to fund or bond for the major large city hall that is mentioned here. So there are funding mechanisms we could, let's say that the council wanted to move forward with a large unitary city hall. We would recommend that we start immediately looking at policies that we put into place at a council level where you're setting, when you're reserve is above a certain amount, your 13%, you have some ratio that you're immediately putting into a capital account to begin the saving process for this building. In addition to that, there are other financing techniques. There are straight up bonds we could get if we figured that the general fund could support the debt service on a $23 to $25 million project, which I can tell you right now it cannot. Or you can always, when we have real numbers, there's general obligation bonds that we can ask the taxpayers to consider. I think that we would have a tough time making that argument, but there are methods, and then, there are other revenue sources. The mayor and I have had that conversation a number of times. There are other revenue sources that are due to the city, either in the short and long term, that could help with the problem. So there are ways we can solve it. It's just going to be how aggressive would you like to be?
I have a question. If we don't do the unitary city hall because it's quite expensive and we don't really have the money and the funds to do it, and we have to make some decisions tonight, we need to look at what we can afford to do and what's needed the most. Do we need to do sheriffs first, or do we need to do some of these other ones first? We need to sort of rank it, and if we're only going to do partial projects, and decide which ones we want to start with.
Well, a couple things you didn't take into consideration is new departments that have yet to existed. For example, we have an IT department now that we didn't have in 1985. And we also have other departments that are forming, such as the data collection. How do you manage your data? Cybersecurity, all that needs actual space. The biggest problem you're going to have in the future is security, physical and cybersecurity. We need to build for the security for the people, for the employees. We had persons stabbed and just wandered into City Hall South. That is something that, that can happen. That's to me, that was a flag to say, get this started.
Yep.
Today's money is more valuable than 30 years down the road. And you went to 20 years. And in 20 years, our city could be close to 70,000. And when we're fully built out with the amount of space that we have, if we go from McHenry to Eleanor, from the river to Clarabelle, could support about 90,000 people or more in the way we're building now. And if we build further up, it's going to be a higher density. In that higher density, you're going to have much more staff. I looked at 50 years. So funding today, let's say we went for full-blown, we go for 25 million at a 1%. We can have some areas that we need to find new funding sources. I'm trying to get funding sources from the county, take away their funding that they get from our property taxes that they take and bring it back into the city. Doing that, we could start collecting some. We have the cannabis industry coming on in that can have tremendous potential. We have the Riverbank Industrial Complex that after X number of years from now will have, let's say, $6 million. So all of those funding sources will add up over a period of time. If we piecemeal it, we'll get what we deserve. So I think we start getting together and finding out what are the funding sources we need, where's the location, and what will provide the best security. I think you're right, Councilmember Campbell, we need to do the police first, because they are probably the biggest liability, when they get into that parking lot going to and from their vehicles. So, and you have people just wandering through, looking in your cars now, and they're really stand-up citizens.
That's usually me.
That's true. So, we don't have the final on this yet. But I would like to expand it by 2 departments and go out at least 30 years what we need servicing 90,000 people.
So you're thinking to year what?
50.
Year 50, okay.
Actually,
Another
I
10
think the 70.
Another 10 years, yeah.
I think the 70, but I've been told that people don't want to think out that far, so I'll go to 30 years out. Our general plan goes to 25.
Right. Well, one option, of course, is to, start saving now and build your 2040 facility, but make sure that you have, on the site, you have a concept of how you would be able to expand it. So you don't necessarily have to build for 2050 or 2070 now if you plan forward and have, areas.
And you build
that
a section at a time as you're accommodating.
Right. yeah.
And then I think what we should be considering as a council, since we've already overcrowded, is a virtual office. That we send half the people, have them work from home, build their offices at home. That'd save you a lot of money until such time that you have a facility, an adequate facility with the IT and the support that they need to work in a group. So virtual offices, to me, that's okay. I could do that. In fact, we could do this in a hologram. We could just, I don't think state law would do that, but.
Hasn't caught up yet.
No, they haven't. But, there's a lot of things that we need to consider coming on down the road. And the main thing is today's money is more valuable than it is building 30 years down, or 20 years, or 10 years down the road.
I agree with what you said, Mayor, and if we do have to start looking at this, looking for the money, maybe one of the things we can do is make a decision about where we want the building and where the property is, and focus on getting the money together to get that property as time goes by, because the property will just get more expensive the longer we wait. And we can't build something somewhere if we decide to move it with the property.
It's a very difficult decision because on the one hand, like Maricela said earlier, we have an immediate need. But certainly spending millions of dollars on an immediate need that really only lasts you 5, maybe 10 years is a tough pill to swallow. So our goal really with John's presentation this evening was to give you the general sort of tone of where we're at. I think based on some of the comments that have been made, Marisol and I can sit down and kind of create for you a couple of parallel paths with some costs associated and how we might get there, and you can sort of bless which one you'd like to see us go down so financially we can start that work. Because, like I said, if the city had taken this effort on in 1990, we probably would have a unitary city hall by now. So
Can I make a couple comments? So that was a lot of process. So I'm going to just kind of think out loud here. Can we get that map back up, please, if you guys don't mind? So the one that was just loaded up, the very last slide that was up. It showed the.
Jiggle your mouse.
No, it's mine.
Oh, it's your mouse?
Well, it's my mouse that he has.
So as that's coming up, so the two big concerns I see is the security and the staff. We are working. We're overcrowded for the staff, and they do need room to work. So I do agree with Cal as far as the sheriff's needs to expand. And if we pull up that map, I'll kind of give you guys an idea of what I'm thinking that I just thought of right now. So like I said, I'm just thinking out loud. And then maybe we should consider also, since it is state mandated and it is providing services to the public, maybe we should consider using the public benefit fund. So I'm just thinking out loud on that. And if we do acquire on the map where City Hall South is, that property next to it, the 16, that would get us to the 16,000. And then if we do a 2-story, we can move into that section and open up this spot for the sheriff to expand there. So, but I think we need to do both options. I think we need to do option 1 and the long term and start it both at the same time. And I agree with the comment Sean made about after a certain percentage of reserve, we set a portion aside for that, for the long term. And I do think now we should go with option one and acquire the property that's across the street there, because they do need the room now. So that's just my general comment.
Parking.
I have a question too.
One minute, parking.
So, let's say that we were able to pull off a unitary city hall concept on the city hall south site with those associated properties. Our concept would be that we need to acquire the remaining portion of that parking lot, which is actually owned by the Bordonas. And then you have generally enough of a parking lot for short term, and then long term you need to go either up or down with a garage of some kind, which would make sense because it's in the downtown, and eventually we'll need that parking anyway.
Well, if you build it the 16 and the 22 square foot, and you build up, once you're done, you can demolish the south, and that's your parking lot, just like they did when they built Sutter Gold down there on Coffee.
Right.
Into the
Yes, you
parking
could.
lot.
Yeah, that's true. You could have some immediate, or you could demolish south and take the first parcel, and then the third could be part. So I mean, there are plenty of options for it. And luckily for us, in the short term, right now, none. I don't want to offend anybody that might be downtown business owners in that area, but I know the building immediately to the south of City Hall South is not in use, and I'm pretty sure the units to the south of that are still not in use. They're either vacant, or I think one of them used to be a boxing club. I don't think anybody's in there anymore. So they could be acquired, which, if you think about it, it's a pretty good scenario overall, because we could be in a position where we just couldn't acquire any properties because they're, active businesses that we're not interested. So,
Be cheaper than the Crossroads West?
would the project be cheaper? John, can you come up and address that? So that was kind of where I was trying to get to. When I asked that question of you, if we had a vacant piece of property elsewhere in
Right.
town, you said that for what I recall you saying is you could save money. The problem is that you're going to be doing paving for parking and water sewer infrastructure, which sort of negates what you would be dealing with in terms of demo costs. Is that essentially correct?
I think the demolition cost, well, unless there's toxic, hazardous issues, the demolition costs are going to be relatively small for any of these buildings, could be hauled away in a couple of days. So figuring on an undeveloped site, it just depends on the site. How far do you have to run a sewer, water, electricity, et cetera? It's very variable. So you'd have to kind of look at that on a site-by-site basis. But I think either way, plus or minus a couple $1,000,000, you could do either. So you probably ought to think in terms of what space can you acquire downtown, and what are the advantages of building your downtown up versus moving to another location. So.
What about using the LRA? We've got that whole front section there that's pretty much administration that's not housed, not as a permanent location, but something to relieve maybe finance for now, or maybe finance and parks. We do a little bit of renovation to make it at least more comfortable for, the next 3 to 5 years. And in the meantime, we're figuring out how to save and how to fund doing a big city hall building.
We could
I
look
mean,
at
we've
that.
got to address it now.
I think so that would be appropriate for those types of positions that are not customer service sort of heavy. So folks that mainly kind of work on the computer and in the office anyway. I think totally.
Not customer service.
I think that would be totally appropriate. And then here's the other wild idea I had when we were Marisol and I were spitballing of what buildings exist in Riverbank, and this is totally off the wall. And so if anybody out there in TV land sees, and please don't take offense, the only building that's office ready that I can think of in Riverbank that could house us at sufficient size, more than sufficient size, is the call center on Patterson and Oakdale. It's got, I don't know what the exact square footage of it is, but it's probably more than enough space interior, and it's got a lot of parking around it. It was just the only building I could think of from a commercial perspective that would even come close to being able to house all of us. I think right now,
Whole section that they're using.
yeah, they do, like, they do party rentals in one, and then I think they used to have a karate class in the other, so.
But it's too close to Flavors.
It is right, well, we're right next door to Riverbank Club. So, you know.
Well, we should research that and the industrial park for immediate relief.
Yep.
I'm talking within the next 6 months to a year, immediate relief of the personnel that are in crowded spaces. And look at the cost of acquiring the site, because it's
So-
only going to go up.
Let me make sure I'm with everybody, because we're going to go back and do some work and bring you something with numbers. But we'd like to expand the unitary concept by 2 mystery departments, whatever they may be, in the future.
They're coming.
They are coming. We want to look to 2050 versus 2040. We will bring back concepts of funding strategies for the really expensive one option, and then some ideas of what we could do that incorporate other facilities that we own already or other locations. There is shuffling that we can do. I'll throw something else out there that wasn't mentioned, but is a little bit of a problem just from a management perspective, is if we lease another space, say the Del Rio offices up there, Norma and I walked it today. It's a very nice building. It would work just fine for one of those departments. From a customer service perspective, I don't love it, because now we have 3 city halls, almost 4 city halls.
Northeast.
Yeah. We've been just calling it City Hall 3, but, and we already have a situation where,
Have people coming in.
yeah.
You know, like Parks and Rec maybe could move out to the industrial park where they have more room to put everything.
It's tough because the mayor's sort of right. The one department that doesn't have as many people coming in as anybody else is our department. Parks and Rec have a lot of kids and parents coming and signing people up all day. You know, obviously utility billing is just payments upon payments all the time. Development services and planning is people filing permits all day long. So there's still just a very active customer service part to what we do every day. We don't talk about it all day long, but there are people at the counter every day, all day, in every department pretty much. So we'll synthesize this all down, but what was very important to us was to kind of hear your general thoughts as a group so we can focus that effort, because right now, it just, as you read the report, it's a lot of information to take in.
I think we should also consider parking, you know, as something we should think about too. Whatever buildings we look at or go to, parking is a big issue.
Okay.
And the sheriff,
Whether it be around, if there's enough around that facility or that building, or if we should be, you know, talking about going up with a garage. And then how soon will we talk about going up with a garage?
Okay.
well, and I think a sheriff's substation would be nice where it was on the other side of the tracks, where they have quick access, especially once Crossroads West is built up. Something in there maybe. Maybe attached to the fire department that hasn't been built yet.
Yeah, the mayor and I have had some initial conversations with the sheriff about maybe a partnership in the future for a substation, so we are looking at that as well.
And let's not forget the corporation.
We're not forgetting about you. We got you a burnt-down building.
Yeah, we got you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Got you a barbecue pit. What do you want?
Any other thoughts? I think we have enough direction.
More, just
Yeah, yes.
security issues,
Yeah.
possible ones.
One of the buildings that I've seen that has going to be a state of the art is there's a school in Houston, Texas, that if there's ever a lockdown, doors close, curtains drop, steel curtains drop. I think there's something similar to that at the planning department in Public Works for the county, where if there is a panic button drops, a wall comes down to protect the employees. You're going to have to also do something to protect the customers that are out there that are exposed. But, if you drop it, you have the employees safe at least. No, I'm not. No, God, you have to.
Unless they put the building on fire.
Then you have water. You have these water sprinklers you're supposed to have. But anyway, no, you're right. Security is the biggest concern now and the future. Right now, we're unsecure. Who can walk into City Hall North right now with being undetected? I do all the time.
We can have somebody walk in here right now.
Oh, we have the chiefs, both chiefs here. They'll take care of us.
Yeah, but they're not always there.
So, yeah, security is the biggest issue.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
And that could be, people walking in, you have someone x-raying them as they're coming on in, as you do for Modesto, yeah.
Also, in the future, I think we ought to discuss our cyber security or their lack of.
That was part of it. Okay. Have we given you enough direction?
More than.
Does anyone from the public want to give direction? Seeing none, we consider that direction provided.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Follow on item 7.1, staff comments.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a number of comments this evening, but I'll make them quick. Provided that some contractual negotiations complete by tomorrow evening, and the city attorney and I are able to finish up some documents, next Tuesday, the Planning Commission will hear an item for cannabis use, an industrial cannabis use at the cannery property, which, as council may recall, was really the whole reason that we even considered cannabis in the first place, was to try to figure out a way to redevelop that property and bring jobs. From an economic development perspective, setting aside land use for a moment, we are very excited about this opportunity. I won't go into real detail on it yet because I want to make sure that the public has the process, but I think that in general, it's something to spend some time considering. So that will, if that is able to be completed and decided upon at the meeting next Tuesday, then it will be at City Council the following meeting. The first meeting in March, for noticing purposes. Two other items. One is we are just about to execute a new lease with a very large tenant at the LRA that is going to bring somewhere between 20 and 50, minimally 20, probably closer to 50 new jobs to our town. They are not jobs that are taken from other communities. This is a brand new facility that we will be adding to the labor pool here in the county. Two other items, council's aware of this because I sent an email on it, but for the community, Kathleen Cleek, our Development Services Administration Manager, was able to get a grant, a CMAQ grant for our 108 crosswalk project in the amount of $200,000. And it looks like maybe another source of funding is going to come in for another couple $100,000. So that'll basically pay for half of the crosswalk project, so it won't all be coming out of our Measure L account. So huge deal there. Also, the mayor and Cal and I and Kathleen met with Caltrans director Dennis McElhaney. I think I said his name right. McElhaney?
Dan McElhaney.
Dan McElhaney. My apologies.
McElhaney.
I'm glad I didn't say that in front of him. So he has not only agreed to help us get the approvals completed for the 108 crosswalk project, but he also agreed to work on shortening the construction timeline here on 108 from whatever, about a year and 4 months or 5 months that they had estimated to about 6 or less. In addition to that, he also shared that they're moving forward with design for a signal at Clausen 108 at long last. So, and that's a very expensive project that Riverbank probably would have had to pay for at some point. So it's very nice that the state is moving forward with that. Finally, Marisol and I have been working on three different housing proposals that are related either to affordable housing projects. There's one project on Ward Avenue we're working with a local developer on, as well as still looking into some of these concepts that were brought up at the nonprofit meeting, specifically with regard to being able to pick up some type of property that could serve as a if not a transitional project, then a affordable project with a transitional component. And we've identified a couple funding sources, so we'll be reporting back on that when we have something you can approve. And that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Fossey?
Thank you. I just would like to make sure everybody's noticed the new lights at, around the Dollar General. Thank you, City Manager, for putting those in. Hopefully, within the next year or two, we can have them where they're actually on the ground and they're ignited when somebody is ready to do the crosswalk. But do slow down when you get near those because it is dark and, well, it's a little bit lighter now because they're bright. But just be careful in that area because kids do walk across the street to go to that Dollar General, including mine. So please don't hit them. Thank you.
Councilmember Campbell?
I would just like to remind people that I believe it's April 25th is going to be I Love Riverbank on a Saturday. And there's a meeting at the One Church on Old Oakdale Road on February the 18th, 7 p.m. They're looking for people to attend that are willing to help out. So encourage people to go to that meeting. Let's all get together and make it workable.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez?
The month of February is Take Your Child to the Library, which encourages families everywhere to take their children to the local library for learning, fun events, and to promote library services. We have an awesome library here in our community. Just want to mention, too, that the weather is starting to get really nice, and so just drive safe and look out for our children and also pets. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
So during public comment, Leanne mentioned the Riverbank Downtown Business Coalition. They'll be meeting tomorrow at Pizza Plus at 6 p.m. And also, on Thursday, sorry. And then tomorrow, the Stanislaus Homeless Alliance will be meeting at 5:30 at the Modesto City Chambers. Both are open to the public and hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you. As you know, the faucet is out. It came out on the 3rd of February. By the 5th of March, we should have comments. I'm encouraging the governor to keep on top of DTSC and also water. Cal EPA also, to not expedite. What happens to a lot of this process, they'll say, I have 30 days. I got this report to do, and then I got this to do, and so 25 days down the road, they go, I'm not done yet, I need an extension. I don't need it extended because I need to go back by being paid for by StanCog, go talk to the Army again and try to get them to authorize us a long-term lease. A long-term lease will allow a METIS to break ground, and that will allow the whole process to get more of a national appeal to it. Did Leanne Jones-Cruz mention anything about a cat park? The wastewater treatment plant has an engineering grant, and I would like to have some preliminary or more final recommendations when I go back to US EPA on the water section about a regional project preliminarily with Escalon and Oakdale, because they have funding available right now. And I'm going to go back hat in hand and ask, I'm going back the very end of March. So I'm meeting them the first Friday, I think it's the 3rd in April. Okay, so I would like to have that available. as well as we need to have some type of more detailed plan for HUD, for affordable housing in our host house. The county has been bypassing us, I think, on purpose, and I'll say that out loud, that I think they're doing it on purpose. So their coalition is county and Modesto-centric. So I think we stop wasting our time and start looking at going to HUD themselves. They've said they have the funding to go to cities. They believe cities are better suited for getting things done than state and county and federal. Okay, that's enough said. Okay, go on to item 8.1, Conference with Real Property Negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, Property 062-031-005 through 007. Agency Negotiator Sean Scully, City Manager. Property Negotiator Ametis Inc. Under negotiation, price, term of payment for both. Conference with, item 8.2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to subdivision Bravo of Government Code 54956.9, one potential case. Item 8.3, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9 alpha. Name of case, Stanislaus Consolidated Fire District versus City of Riverbank and DOES 1-20. Stanislaus County Superior Court case number CV 19004402. Before we go into closed session, anyone from the public may speak on these closed session items. They have 5 minutes to speak. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, we adjourn to closed session.
we recently ended a big fat bill for spilling.
I'm sure we'll get that paid right away.
Regular City Council LRA Board meeting for February 11th, 2020 reconvenes. Item 9.1, report from closed session on item 8.1, conference with real property negotiators and Menace Inc. Direction has been provided to staff. Item 9.2, report from closed session on item 8.2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, one potential case. Direction has been provided to staff. Item 9.3, report from closed session on item 8.3, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, Stanislaus Consolidated Fire Protection District versus the City of Riverbank and DOES 1-20. Again, direction has been provided to staff. Our next regular city council meeting is Tuesday, February 25th at 6 p.m. This meeting is now adjourned.